in the southern heart of India, where the land of Mysore was once rich with silk, sandalwood, and strength. A boy was born in 1751 who would one day shake the foundations of British power in India. His name was Tipu Sultan, the eldest son of Hyder Ali, a brilliant general who rose from a soldier to the ruler of Mysore. From his childhood, Tipu was trained not as a prince of comfort, but as a warrior of destiny. His education was as fierce as his father's ambition. He learned Arabic, Persian, Urdu, and Kannada, but his true lessons came from the battlefield. Hyder Ali taught him the art of strategy, the science of weaponry, and the value of courage. As a child, Tipu accompanied his father into wars, riding beside generals and witnessing the ruthless strength of empires. The young prince watched the British East India Company expand its claws across Indian soil, manipulating rulers, toppling dynasties, and building a private empire in the name of trade. From an early age, Tipu understood that the British were not merchants, they were conquerors in disguise. As Tipu grew into manhood, the clouds of conflict gathered over southern India. Mysore, under Hyder Ali, was already one of the most powerful states in India, controlling fertile lands, trade routes, and a disciplined army that challenged both the Marathas and the British. When Hyder Ali died in 1782 during the Second Anglo-Mysore War, Tipu Sultan inherited not just a throne but an unfinished war. He became the ruler of Mysore at a young age, stepping into the role with an iron will. His enemies underestimated him, thinking him a mere successor of his father's glory. But Tipu quickly proved that he was far more than that. His mind was sharp, his vision modern, and his resolve unbreakable. He reorganized the army, introduced new military technology, and maintained a spy network that stretched across the Indian subcontinent. His soldiers, known for their discipline and loyalty, carried muskets and rockets, yes, rockets, in warfare long before Europe adopted the idea. These weapons would later inspire the development of rocket artillery in the West. Tipu Sultan's reign was marked by both reform and resistance. He established a strong central administration, improved agriculture, built irrigation systems, and modernized the coinage. He understood the power of economy in warfare and introduced new revenue systems that increased the prosperity of Mysore. But at the same time, his eyes were fixed on the horizon, on the British forts and garrisons that surrounded him. His greatest battles were not only fought on land but also in diplomacy. He formed alliances with the French, who were Britain's rivals in Europe. French engineers helped him strengthen his fortresses and modernize his army. His capital, Srirangapatna, became a symbol of defiance, a fortified city that represented native strength against foreign rule. The First Anglo-Mysore War, fought during Hyder Ali's time, had already shown the British that Mysore was not a kingdom to be taken lightly. But under Tipu, the Second and Third Anglo-Mysore Wars would prove even more costly. The British underestimated the ferocity and discipline of his forces. He struck fast, moved with precision, and used the terrain to his advantage. His knowledge of military strategy and guerrilla warfare allowed him to defeat much larger forces. In 1782, he managed to hold his ground and force the British into the Treaty of Mangalore in 1784. That treaty was one of the few moments in history when the British were compelled to sign peace on equal terms with an Indian ruler. It was a humiliation for the East India Company and a personal victory for Tipu Sultan. Across India, his name began to echo as the Tiger of Mysore. The tiger became his personal emblem, on his throne, his weapons, his uniforms. He once said, "Better to live one day as a tiger than 1,000 years as a sheep." It was not just a motto, it was his life's code. But the British never forgot their defeat. They returned stronger, richer, and more determined. In the Third Anglo-Mysore War of 1790 to 1792, the company forged alliances with the Marathas and the Nizam of Hyderabad, Tipu's former rivals. Surrounded on all sides, Tipu fought with extraordinary courage, but the odds were overwhelming. His capital was besieged, and his forces suffered heavy losses. Yet even then, he refused to surrender unconditionally. The Treaty of Seringapatam that followed forced him to give up half his kingdom and pay a massive indemnity. To ensure his compliance, the British demanded 2 of his sons as hostages. When the British General Lord Cornwallis took the young princes, Tipu stood tall, his face calm but his heart burning. His sons were dressed in royal garments, and he sent them off saying, "These are my sons. Treat them as princes." The act of sending his own children as hostages to preserve his state became one of the most tragic and noble scenes in Indian history. It showed his pride, discipline, and sense of duty above personal emotion. Though weakened, Tipu Sultan did not rest. He rebuilt his army, restructured his administration, and reignited his alliances with the French. He corresponded with Napoleon Bonaparte, who was then rising to power in Europe and threatening British interests in Egypt. Tipu hoped that a French invasion of India could help drive the British out. His dream was to create a confederation of Indian powers free from European domination. He envisioned Mysore as an independent, self-reliant state with advanced technology and education. He established factories for producing arms, gunpowder, and textiles. He encouraged foreign artisans and experts to settle in Mysore and train his people. He improved trade by building roads and ports, and his rule encouraged innovation. His kingdom became one of the most prosperous in India, admired even by his enemies. British officials described him as intelligent, capable, and determined, though they called him ambitious and dangerous. To them, Tipu was not just a ruler, he was a threat to their empire. By 1799, the British had made up their minds. They could not tolerate a strong, independent ruler in southern India who refused to bow. Lord Wellesley, the British Governor-General, launched the Fourth Anglo-Mysore War with the aim of destroying Tipu Sultan completely. The British once again allied with the Nizam and the Marathas, surrounding Mysore from all sides. Srirangapatna, Tipu's capital, became the center of resistance. The siege began with heavy bombardments. The British artillery pounded the city walls day and night, while Tipu's soldiers defended with rockets and muskets. Even as defeat loomed, Tipu Sultan refused all offers of surrender. His ministers urged him to flee and regroup, but he replied, "It is better to die like a soldier than to live as a slave." He took his sword, wore his armor, and went to the ramparts to fight alongside his men. On May 4, 1799, the British forces stormed the fort. Fierce hand-to-hand combat erupted in the narrow streets of Srirangapatna. Tipu fought to the very end, striking down several enemies before a bullet pierced his body near the gates of the fort. He fell surrounded by the dead and dying, still clutching his sword. When the British officers found his body among the fallen, they saluted his bravery. Even his enemies acknowledged that he died like a true warrior king. The death of Tipu Sultan marked the end of Mysore's independence. His kingdom was annexed, his treasures looted, and his palaces plundered. The British placed a puppet ruler on the throne, and Mysore became a subordinate ally of the East India Company. But Tipu's legacy did not die with him. Across India, he became a symbol of resistance, a ruler who dared to stand against the most powerful empire of his time. For decades after his death, stories of his courage and valor inspired freedom fighters. Indian soldiers in later rebellions, including the 1857 uprising, chanted his name as a symbol of defiance. The rockets he invented were studied and later influenced the development of European rocket systems. His administrative and military innovations were admired even by British historians, who described him as one of the most capable rulers of the 18th century. Tipu Sultan's life also had a lasting impact on culture and memory. His palace, the Darya Dulat Bagh in Srirangapatna, still stands with murals depicting his victories. His famous mechanical tiger, an automaton showing a tiger mauling a British soldier, now rests in the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, a haunting reminder of his hatred for colonial domination. The tiger motif, his personal symbol, continues to represent his spirit of independence. Scholars describe him as one of the first Indian rulers to recognize the nature of European imperialism and to resist it not just with arms but with modernization. He sought to blend tradition with technology, faith with progress, and courage with governance. He was deeply religious yet pragmatic, strict yet visionary. His enemies called him ruthless, his followers called him